I think most Sacramento Kings fans would agree that general manager Monty McNair has had a really solid offseason. So why haven't the Kings extended his contract? The Athletics' Jason Jones has a major conspiracy theory on this topic, and he shares it with us right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all off season. Today's episode is presented by BetOnline. They have you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer for ABC 10 News, and I've known Jason Jones for the entire time that I've covered Sacramento Kings basketball. Jason Jones formerly was the Kings beat writer for the Sacramento Bee, now works for The Athletic, has spent a few years covering the Kings, and then now general sports topics, in-depth kind of cultural pieces. He does a lot of different stuff for The Athletic. Jason is someone who, even though he comes from a Los Angeles Lakers background in terms of his fandom, and he likes to remind Sacramento Kings fans of that. He's been in the trenches covering the Kings for a long time, the final few years of their playoff run, and then all of this playoff drought. So he's very familiar with Sacramento Kings basketball, the ups and downs, mainly downs, with the Sacramento Kings, which is why I wanted to have him on. And initially my plan was to talk to him about the state of this roster, whether or not this is the best Sacramento Kings roster the Kings have had during this playoff drought. And we do discuss that. He does answer that question, but I'm playing this interview a bit out of order. I actually took the middle of this interview and put it first, because in the middle of this interview, we start talking about Monty McNair and why we think that he hasn't been extended yet. And Jason goes into this deep conspiracy theory about why he thinks Monty McNair has not been re-signed yet, whether or not his job is in jeopardy. And he bases it off of things that he has been told regarding the way the organization has operated in the past and may still currently be operating. And I'm going to warn you, it's a bit concerning. Now, I am going to take the side of this conspiracy theory isn't reality, although there's definitely fact to support this conspiracy theories and evidence in the past to support this conspiracy theory. You're going to hear it directly from Jason Jones. I am choosing to believe that while this conspiracy theory I think is very possible, it's not nearly as out of left field as most conspiracy theories are in regards to anything. I'm choosing to believe that this is not what's going on, but you're going to hear Jason explain it for himself, and maybe, just maybe, you'll end up agreeing with him, or you might be scared to death by it. Regardless, here is my conversation with the Athletics' Jason Jones and his conspiracy theory as to why Kings general manager Monty McNair hasn't been re-signed. The fact that Monty McNair hasn't been extended or re-signed at this point in time, after I think he's had a pretty brilliant offseason. We haven't seen results yet on the floor, but by most people look at this offseason and go, yeah, Monty's done a really, really good job. Plus, he just hired his first head coach. Is that concerning to you, or is that really much to do about nothing?
I think there has to be a certain level of concern, just because you fired Vlade with 2 or 3 years left on his deal, and you brought in someone to quote fix what Vlade done wrong. And most people would tell you the Kings are looking in the right direction. This guy can't get another year, and I'll kind of play just even though I wasn't following the Kings daily, I still talk to plenty of people about them. I don't want to say I'll play devil's advocate. Let me play conspiracy theorist. We all say Monty McNair, that Mike Brown is Monty McNair's coach, but Monty comes from that Hinkie Daryl Morey tree, which I don't think anyone from that tree would necessarily say Mike Brown fits that mold, even though he's kind of been with Steve Kerr. Mm. But who does Mike Brown have ties to? Wes Wilcox. Mm. And what if like I said, and this is, I'm only throwing it out there because it's been floated to me. What if, Wes is eyeing that position? Because we all forget, Wes also interviewed for that job, which is still kind of weird that he's the assistant GM. But what if, that move is made and you start saying, if things aren't working, and we all know how the way things have gone under Vivek, there's always someone there already ready to take someone else's job. What if this is ultimately how West somehow becomes the GM? And then really, and perhaps, he got his coach because he's got Mike there already. I mean, as crazy as it sounds, that's been floated out there to me already.
If that conspiracy theory were to be true, though, Jason, is that a positive for the Kings in the sense that the transition would seemingly be fluid, or is it more of a negative toward the Kings, the fact that they put themselves in that position again to have someone beneath Monty, who, and I'm never going to accuse Wes or anything like that, or I don't think anybody would accuse Wes of like acting against Monty while working underneath him. But are the Kings creating a dynamic like that by putting the replacement so close to the guy that is currently in the position?
Well, the Kings are, I'll say the Kings have created the kind of the thought in two ways. One, by not extending Monty, especially after everyone agrees that he's had a pretty good offseason, and that not just this, that he's drafted, his first round picks have all been good picks. He brings you a former All-Star in Sabonis. So when you don't extend him after doing that, that's just one thing. And then a lot of this is also because people just don't trust the way Vivek and the Kings do business. We've seen on too many occasions with them in the front office where someone is already there and somehow he becomes the next person. People forget Vlade wasn't supposed to be the GM. He was there to help out. And then all of a sudden he's the GM and Pete's out, And then you had the whole Vlade, Brandon Williams, Dave Yeager saga. You've always had kind of these, you even go back to the whole Mully thing with Weber. I'm not Weber, Mully and Malone. And was Mullen supposed to be the coach of the team? And more, I think a lot of that speculation around the league is more so about the fact that people expect the Kings to be the Kings at some point.
And is it just winning that cures that reputation? Like, not more than 1 year, I would imagine. Multiple years of winning and getting into the playoffs, or does it take a championship to change that reputation? Is that fixable, I guess, for this front office and for the ownership group?
Yeah, winning. Remember, I mean, Robert Sarver was the worst owner in basketball until he got Chris Paul. And you may argue that based on some of those allegations against him, he still might be the worst owner in basketball. But his team won 60 plus games. So, that those 60 wins are like a great cologne or perfume over whatever else is going on. The Kings haven't had a winning record ever in Sacramento outside of Rick Adelman. They haven't been to the playoffs in 16 years. The streak is getting close to being legal. So I mean, it's just a lot of these things that you hear and people speculate about with the Kings are just based on the expectation. Oh, there's got to be something crazy going on because that's what they do. And it's hard to dispute it when you've seen so many times that, oops, yep, there they go. There they go. Just when you think they're going to turn the corner, there we go. I mean, I've been around, I thought they were starting to turn the corner under Malone. You fire Malone. You start to see positive signs under Yeager, but you let, personal beefs and strife ruin that. For all the crap Luke Walton took, you saw some strides at times with Luke get rid of Luke. So, I mean, everyone just kind of expects, something to happen. And then there's also this other factor is that even people in the building have said things are fine until Vivek changes his mind. We're sticking with the plan until he decides we're not with the plan anymore. So there's always that wild card of what if Vivek gets impatient? Mm-hmm. And that creates an environment where people are kind of always looking out for themselves because This what like I said, the whole scenario people have floated to me with Wes. Hypothetically speaking, because this is all hypothetical. I'm not accusing Wes of doing anything. I'm not doing anything like that. But hypothetically, if you work for the Kings and you have an owner who is prone to change his mind and take someone else's ideas, blah blah blah, so on and so forth, wouldn't it make sense for you to try to curry favor with him in case he changes his mind one day and that job becomes open out the blue? It only makes sense. But that's the kind of environment the Kings have created, especially as they continue to lose. So until that changes, and to me, if you want to end all that speculation around the league, you just extend Monty a year, a year or two. I mean, Vlade got an extension for, I won't say for less, because the team did win 39 games when he got his extension. But, I think Vlade is the only executive, head guy with the Kings to ever get an extension under Vivek. And then he got fired like about a year after the extension. So, I mean, and that firing with Vlade, I know Vlade gets plenty of heat for how things went, but you fired Vlade based on what happened in the bubble, which to me wasn't fair. It was like no one had experienced that. And the fact was that team just overall, outside of Bogey and Harrison, those guys weren't ready. And they honestly, frankly, weren't good enough. They didn't have a player better than DeMar DeRozan that year. And I just think that those kind of snap judgments keep you in the spot the Kings are in. So I'm really curious to see if they're going to let Monty kind of finish this thing out and see how it plays out. But as long as he doesn't have an extension, there's going to be talking, and chatter. And if you're a Kings fan, just hope there's not a report coming out like there was a couple of years ago that all of a sudden Vivek wants to hang out with Sam Hinkie or so there's something crazy coming out.
Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your sports betting needs. You can find your favorite sports and events and the number one online source for odds, lines, and games. That's BetOnline, and they have reviews and news for every league. That includes MLB, NBA, NFL, NHL, combat sports, esports, college sports, even golf. They have it all. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. And now that unfortunately Chet Holmgren has gone down for the season with his foot injury, which you hate to see, it's helped the betting odds for Keegan Murray. He's vaulted all the way up to the second best odds to win Rookie of the Year behind Paolo Banchero. And if you're feeling good about that, you can go and drop that bet right now, as well as other great Kings futures bets on BetOnline. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening right now at BetOnline, where the game starts. Jason, is this the year? Or do you even want to humor that question?
The last time I thought it was the year, it all went down the toilet. So maybe I just don't want to. I think this is the best roster they've had. I think the 20. I think in terms of talent, the George Karl team would probably be next in terms of overall talent. But those guys were kind of thrown together in a year. I just think overall, this is probably the best roster they've had in the last 16, 17 years. What that'll mean, who knows? But I just think this is the overall it's been a while since you could say the Kings had a, rotation that would say 1 through 8, 1 through 9, where they're all legit NBA rotation players.
Is it the depth specifically that makes it the best roster, you think, or is it the specific names of players that are on this roster, or talent level of players on this roster, kind of a combination of both? Is it, for me, it's the execution of a plan. You have your two stars who aren't three-point shooters. You went out and got a bunch of three-point shooting. You have a team that struggles defensively. You went out and got one of the best defensive head coaches, at least we think, in the league, in Mike Brown. Is it that aspect? What is it specifically that makes you say, yeah, this roster is the best that the Kings have had?
I think it's just, for me, it's not so much the names, it's the depth. I think you look at the idea of, 2 years ago, folks would probably argue that Kevin Herter would be like their second best player. And that's not a knock on Kevin, but kind of one of the issues the Kings have had is that, like, people were mad at Buddy Hield for being Buddy Hield, but it wasn't Buddy Hield's fault that there weren't any other guards on the team. you know, he was it's just, I just think it's the depth overall. I think you look at the fact they actually have more than one wing player besides Harrison Barnes. I mean, there's just been some real, I think you may question what they do with power forward, but overall, this is just they have some like I said, some depth on the perimeter. It may not be the greatest depth in the long run, but for the last 3-4 years, it's been okay. Harrison, can you guard the other team's 2, 3, and 4? And to me, it's no coincidence that even when Harrison has those great starts to the season, he just kind of wears down, and he'll never admit it, but the coaches and everybody would tell you that they were just, they knew Harrison was getting run into the ground, that he needed help. So I think they've gotten some help, and there's been a lot of criticism of De'Aaron, but I think now De'Aaron has some help. Are these the 2016 Warriors? No, but I think getting him some more shooting. I mean, like you said, if your two best players aren't shooters, get some shooting around them. They got some more shooting. They got some size. I think Terrence Davis being healthy gives them some depth, on the bench. Keegan Murray, the greatest summer league player we've all ever seen. So I think they've got some pieces. The only thing is that when I look at the West, they're to me, they're still just, obviously we haven't seen the new ratings on 2K to know exactly where they're going to be at, but they're right in that, to me, that 9, 10, 11 range right now. Obviously things will change with, injuries, how the season goes. You have to assume that if Damian Lillard's healthy, Portland will be better. I don't think the Lakers can be any worse than they were last year. You have to assume that with Zion presumably healthy and able to play, New Orleans will be better. There's just to me, I only see 2 or 3 teams in the West where I say they're not making the playoffs. I look at the Rockets, I look at OKC, I look at Utah, and to say, yeah, they're probably not going to get in.
San Antonio not on that list for you?
Oh, yeah. I always forget about. I think by default, I just assume San Antonio will be in. But
we all do.
yeah. And so make it 4 teams, where I just kind of say, yeah, that's not going to happen for them. So if the Kings finish behind one of those 4 teams, someone's going to be in trouble.
Absolutely. Well, you brought up Harrison Barnes, and he kind of feels like a wild card to me because we all expect him to be better, especially defensively, than he was last year. Then again, how much can we blame Harrison Barnes for having a bad defensive year when everybody else beside him, not named Davion Mitchell, was bad defensively? But also, he's the wild card in terms of this term asset management that a lot of Kings fans and media members have talked about, because you have Harrison on the final year of his deal. That usually means players typically play well in the final year because they're playing for their next contract, and that could benefit the Kings, obviously. But then when you're the Sacramento Kings, you always have to worry about losing a free agent for nothing. And Harrison obviously is extremely valuable, has provided the only depth that the Kings have had at that 3 spot. And this, Jason, covering the team, with the exception of a Harrison Barnes, a Rudy Gay, a Ron Artest, that has been a historically, Peja Stojakovic too, that's been a historically very difficult position for the Sacramento Kings to fill, that nightly starting 3 spot. So if you're the Kings, are you concerned about losing Harrison so much so that you feel like you have to more than likely move on from him, even if it's at the trade deadline? Or do you ride it out, say he's the best that we're going to get at this position right now, and hope that maybe you have a good enough season that convinces him to stick around?
I think you got to ride it out. Unless the season is just terrible, like get to the All-Star break or around the deadline and you have no chance of making the playoffs. This team, it's, we've heard the whole it's playoffs or bust edict before, which of course the Kings always say, well, that's not true, but no, it is. they got to get in the playoffs. And if you're trading Harrison Barnes, what you're saying is that you don't think you're going to make the playoffs. And I don't think, you know, I don't think Monty McNair wants to lose his job. I mean, I don't think he's trying to get fired. So you have to do something. I just think if you're bailing on Harrison in February, that just tells me things have not gone well. Or maybe, how about I flip it in the positive way? Maybe Keegan Murray really is the second coming of, I don't know, Paul Pierce. And you're like, you know what? We got to free up more room for Keegan. But even then, I just don't see a scenario where you move him. But he'll have value, because remember the deal. One of the things that Vlade and their front office did really well was those declining value deals. So Harrison's cap number is going to be very attractive to someone. You know, like, and if you're struggling, you know, maybe you do move on from him just to try to get an asset. But I really just think you got to ride this thing out. I think you've got to give it, kind of put your best foot forward and hope that, you know, guys stay healthy. And then, like I said, to me, cracking, excuse me, cracking a top 10 should be the minimum goal.
Right.
You know, I know everyone wants them to be in the playoffs, but I'm like, this team hasn't made the top 10. I think we got to see something like that, to where if there's an important basketball game in April in Sacramento, to me that's a step in the right direction.
Keegan Murray, you talked about him potentially being the starting three that the Kings are hoping for, maybe even the starting four. A lot of NBA head coaches don't necessarily like to rush rookies, especially when they're coaching teams that they expect to actually compete or be good, not like a OKC or Rocket situation. No disrespect to them, or Orlando. They're going to throw Paolo out there, let him get his points. They don't care. For a team like the Sacramento Kings in that position, I think Keegan Murray should be a night one starter. I think he fits already with what the Sacramento Kings are trying to do. And one of the biggest benefits of drafting him, or one of the biggest, I guess, stars on his resume in this draft class, was his ability to make an immediate impact, being the most NBA ready prospect out of those top picks. But we don't know Mike Brown's philosophy yet. Maybe he chooses to go with like a Trey Lyles or a Harrison Barnes at the 4 lineup and ease Keegan Murray into things. Where are you at with that? Do you think it's more beneficial or smarter for the Kings to ease Keegan Murray in? Or are you of the belief of, hey man, throw him out here? You drafted him for this position. It needs to be filled. Throw him out there.
I think I think he's a day one starter. Just for the fact that if you're gonna, I think they're probably going to play a lot of more small ball. You're going to put Sabonis at the 5. If Sabonis is your 5, you got to space the floor to maximize him and his ability to be a facilitator, play at the elbows and whatnot. So I think you've got to, if you go with a combination of Barnes and Murray, especially considering more teams are playing that way, you don't have the same number of teams using the 2 bigs up front. I think you can get away with it. And I just think you run with it. I mean, unless you're really of the belief that he's a rookie who needs to be eased in, but he's the 4th pick in the draft. I mean, he wasn't the 28th pick. I think you take a guy at 4, he's got to be able to help you much sooner than later. I mean, he played, it's crazy that he played 2 years of college ball, but nowadays 2 years of college ball is like almost being a senior in the draft.
Right.
So he should be a guy who can help them from day one. And to me, that's putting him in the starting lineup. And I guess, if you're going Fox, Herter, Barnes, Murray, Sabonis, you should be ideally switchable defensively. I think you might have some concerns about Keegan defensively, like you are with all rookies, and whether or not he's got the foot speed. But I also think that with his size, he'll probably defend 4s. He and Harrison can be interchangeable. So me, I go with him from day one. What's the point of holding back? I mean, Trey Lyles is a nice rotation piece, but are you really going to, be one of those teams that pours a bunch of minutes into Trey Lyles and lets Keegan wait? I mean, we went through this with Dave Yeager and Marvin Bagley with his first game, where everybody lost their minds because Marvin played 12 minutes. So I don't think that'll be the case with Keegan.
You brought up what I think is going to be the probable opening night starting five, but you had Kevin Herter at the 2 instead of Malik Monk. I personally think that's what the Kings are going to do as well, but you've obviously followed Malik closely over the last year with his time in Los Angeles and even before that in his time in Charlotte. Why do you think it's Herter over Monk at this point in your mind?
I just think they don't need to be that small in the backcourt. I mean, just to go that small and defensively, especially considering how De'Aaron can be so up and down defensively, you don't want two small guards who may or may not play defense. And I just think, what Malik has shown is that in that role, he can, off the bench, he's instant offense. And it's kind of like, I almost feel bad for Buddy. Not feel bad, but that's the role Buddy Hield should have been in, and it worked well when you did it with Bogdanovich. When you put a bigger guard with De'Aaron plays well. He played I forget how well he played with Bogey.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't quite work with Tyrese. I think part of that is also because Tyrese was still figuring it out. But but I just think to me, that just makes sense because now you've got like 6'7", 6'8", 6'8" out there with De'Aaron, and De'Aaron's 6'3" or so, but he's got that long wingspan. He can defend bigger people too. So I think I just like starting the game out that way with them. But what do I know? They might surprise us and be like, okay, we're going to start Monk and Trey Lyles. Jason, you're an idiot. So, like Chimezie Metu's playing the 4. Jason, shut up.
We started this conversation talking about this being, we think, the best roster the Kings have had since they are in the 16-year playoff drought. Is Mike Brown the best head coach, even before coaching a single game the Kings have had? Is he the best coach Sacramento has had since Rick Adelman?
I don't know. I mean, he has the most accomplishments, but I don't know if he's the best. Just because, I'd just be speculating because he's the one guy who's had a track record they've hired. You might argue Dave might be the best. Dave had a lot of success in Memphis, and still over that span since Adelman, he has the best single season record since Adelman. So maybe it's Dave Yeager. But Mike, like I said, Mike is accomplished. I know Mike has his detractors as well, just in terms of, is he the type of guy who's going to take you to the next level type thing? But the next level for the Kings really is top 10. It's not, no one's asking Mike Brown to win the NBA championship next season. Can you get him in the top 10? Can you give Sacramento a reason to care about basketball past, Valentine's Day? And not kind of that false hope like, well, if they win every game out and every team ahead of them loses 5, they can get to the top 10. And that's what it was kind of like under Luke's 2 full years, but was also kind of discouraging about at least some of that time too, was that they played some of their best ball when De'Aaron was out, particularly on defense. That, to me, and so you've got to figure if Mike can somehow get De'Aaron to be engaged from day one. Because he started out last season, he was awful. And I don't think that team was too dependent on De'Aaron playing well to overcome that. I don't think and even still, De'Aaron has got to play well, or Mike Brown looks like a bad coach and mine looks like a bad GM, and everybody's going to get fired anyway.
Jason, before I let you go, I know you have thoughts on this Tyrese Haliburton. I don't know if it's a situation. It's just the reports and the stories coming out of Indiana and Tyrese, who's always been very open about his emotions and his feelings. It's what made him so likable amongst the media here in Sacramento. But him feeling this resentment towards the Kings organization for how they treated him. I know you covered the entire saga with DeMarcus Cousins and what happened between the Kings and Cousins. And I've seen some Kings fans try and compare the two. I don't think they're comparable even in the slightest. But I know you have thoughts on this Tyrese Haliburton situation, whether or not he should feel resentment and whether or not the Kings mistreated him in any way.
Well, I mean, he should feel. He should feel resentment. He wouldn't be a competitor if he didn't feel some type of way.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think also part of it is he's answering questions, and Tyrese it's not like Tyrese went to Twitter yesterday and was like, "I'm going to trash." Can he answer the question? Part of that quote that came out of that story was that he's moving past. He's like, "I felt that, and I'm moving past it." But everyone saw the word resentment and said, "Oh my God, Tyrese hates them." I'm like, he's supposed to. I mean, DeMarcus has resentment. I mean, Rudy Gay had resentment when he. What people don't realize. I know it's a little joke that there's like a club of guys who say we survived the Sacramento Kings. Like we made it out of there. With all the wackiness and everything that goes with. So I mean, I get how he feels. I just think it's August and things like that. If he says that, in December before they play, it's a quote, but it's not nearly as big of a deal. There's nothing going on right now.
Right.
So, oh my God, he said what? It's like, oh, he's not supposed to be happy, especially when there's a lot of folks would argue that the reason he got traded was because of De'Aaron's contract, because they couldn't trade De'Aaron. Because Tyrese was extremely popular on that team. He was a leader already. He was a connector. He was a guy that they relied. So, I mean, I understand he did everything he was supposed to do and got traded. And I understand his feelings. I get it. But I don't think it's the thing where people need to be like, oh, my God, he needs to just move on. No, that's not the way he's wired. He's an ultimate competitor. And so he's going to want to see the Kings get a Kings 30, 15, and 15. And I'm here for it. I think that I'm here for that because in a world where we criticize athletes for not caring, Tyrese cares.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not going to knock him at all for what he said. He answered a question. People say he needs to stop talking about it. It's like he answered a question. I mean, maybe you can argue he should say I'm not going to answer that, but it wasn't like he attacked the organization. Guys don't like getting traded.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand why that's hard to understand, especially when, in his case, he probably really believes that they weren't going to trade him. And that's the part of the business that's tough when guys feel like the team is telling them, "Oh, we were not going to trade you." I'm like, don't lie to the guy. Mm-hmm. And maybe, maybe you have that conversation and things change, but still, I mean, to me, there's only about 5-10 guys who I would say aren't getting traded in the NBA. And Tyrese would not be among those guys. That's like LeBron, that's Steph. I would say KD. Well, I guess KD's not getting traded either. But there's a short list of guys who are at that level. But I completely understand his frustration. I get his frustration, and I would just say, hey, you say you want athletes to be honest. He's being honest with us, and I'm here for it. And I can't wait till he comes back to Sacramento. He's a wrestling fan. I'm a wrestling fan. We would talk, so that's, I'm all for wearing. I think he's a big Shawn Michaels fan, and he likes Edge. I'll wear my Edge shirt when he's in town.
Jason Jones, always the voice of reason and sometimes brutal honesty here in Sacramento. I appreciate you. Why I love having you on, my friend. Hope you're well. It's good to talk to you. Hopefully I'll see you at the Golden One Center this season, and be good. We'll do it again very soon.
Yeah, I'll be around. You'll see me.
So there you go. Jason Jones's conspiracy theories, Jason Jones's thoughts on this roster, on Mike Brown as a head coach. A lot of good stuff in there. Maybe you don't subscribe to Jason's beliefs. Maybe you do subscribe to Jason's beliefs. Are you even considering that as a possibility? Are you terrified that that's the truth? Send it to me. Send me your thoughts. Let's talk about it. At Matt George Sack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. Leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. And again, thank you to Jason for joining me here on Locked On Kings today. Hope you will join me for the next episode of Locked On Kings. We're almost at September. We still have the whole month of September to get through before actual Kings basketball in October. But September means the start of training camp. So we're getting through it. We're almost there. Thank you for sticking with me. Appreciate your support as always. And I hope you will join me on the next episode. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.